If you were a kid in the 90s, two things that often kept you up at night were the Goosebumps book series and the Are You Afraid of the Dark television series. I personally preferred Goosebumps over Are You Afraid of the Dark. Goosebumps was a series of horror books for kids, with a variety of situations often compared to that of The Twilight Zone. It was a light horror series for children. The books were never really all that scary, but reading them as a child was always very enjoyable, and there were honestly a few stories that could be quite frightful at times. The interesting thing was that each book was its own individual story, and only a few of them were ever direct sequels to a previous book. So, when the new Goosebumps movie was announced, I was naturally just a little skeptical. Because you see, rather than being an adaptation of any of the actual books, or even being an anthology film that tells several stories which may or may not connect, similar to that of the Twilight Zone movie, the Goosebumps movie is an original story that incorporates all of R.L. Stine's stories. I wasn't sure how it would be able to do this, but it does a good job with this surprisingly enough. So, how does the new Goosebumps film manage to incorporate several stories that were never connected in any way, stay truthful to the original material, and feel like a real Goosebumps experience? Let's find out.
Beware, you're in for a scare.
The film focuses on Zach Cooper, played by Dylan Minnette. Zach moves to Madison, Delaware, and quickly becomes friends with his new neighbor, Hannah, played by Odeya Rush. Her father turns out to be the author of the Goosebumps books, R.L. Stine. However, he has taken to hiding his identity and living a secret life. R.L. Stine is played by Jack Black. And can I just say, I have no idea how we're supposed to believe that Jack Black is R.L. Stine. They didn't even try to make him look like it. But despite not even trying to look anything like R.L. Stine, Jack Black's performance is pretty good. He doesn't exactly act how you'd imagine R.L. Stine, and he overacts a lot. But his performance is good enough that after watching the movie long enough, you slowly just forget that it's Jack Black. Or at least you forget until R.L. Stine has his blink and you miss it cameo, and then it all just comes back to you. Yeah, Jack Black is nothing like R.L. Stine. So, it's eventually revealed that all the monsters in the Goosebumps books are real, and they are trapped inside of the original manuscripts due to the power of R.L. Stine's
imagination.
Zach, along with his friends, and the comedic relief characters of the movie, Champ, portrayed by Ryan Lee, unknowingly open one of Stine's manuscripts, freeing the monster trapped inside. Through a series of events, the manuscripts open and several monsters are free. Most dangerously is Slappy, the living dummy. Zach, Hannah, and Champ, along with R.L. Stine, must trap the monsters back in their manuscripts and come up with a way to stop Slappy before he can take revenge on R.L. Stine for trapping him for all those years. So that's the basic synopsis of the movie, but you could have gotten that from the trailers. So, does the Goosebumps movie do a good job? I'd say it does. The Goosebumps movie does a good job with representing what makes Goosebumps so good. It isn't set up as a horror movie, and that's perfectly fine. The movie is able to set up suspense, and you have to be paying attention to get all the details. There are a couple of small details that are important in the end, but you thought didn't mean anything in the beginning. It also features a classic Goosebumps twist. You see, one of the best things about the Goosebumps books is that there's often a twist in the third act that completely changes everything you thought, and makes you wonder how things will end. The twist in the Goosebumps movie was one that I did not see coming at all, and it was definitely a true Goosebumps style twist. The resolution was very lackluster, but the twist itself was more than enough to make up for this bad resolution. Although, for everything I can say that the movie does well in terms of feeling like a Goosebumps story, there are just a few things that can't be replicated. The film does an amazing job of showing off several of the greatest monsters from Goosebumps, but I feel that it can't really show what made Goosebumps so enjoyable. See, while the monsters were an important part of the story, The important thing in the Goosebumps books were the characters that had to deal with the monsters. The television series, which was simply an adaptation of the original stories, did this perfectly. It would sometimes add small details or often change a few details around so they could work better on screen than on paper. Whether it be simple paranoia or a self-imposed threat, there's a subtle mental aspect to the Goosebumps stories that the movie just can't replicate. The movie focuses on the monsters, and the Goosebumps stories often focused on the characters, so you can't really get the whole feel from it. Another problem I have with the film focusing on the monsters of the Goosebumps series is that there are some books that don't have an actual monster. Not every book required a monster to be good, because sometimes it was just a mental game, and sometimes it was something that just can't be seen on screen. There isn't really that much representation for stories without an actual monster, such as the Cuckoo Clock of Doom, or Be Careful What You Wish For, just to make a couple of examples. The monsters are important, yes, but they aren't the only thing that makes a Goosebumps book what it is. And the movie at times makes you feel like the monsters are the only thing that matters, because it focuses so much on them. But despite not being able to deal with the non-monster parts of the Goosebumps series, it's still an enjoyable movie. I will say, however, the CG in the movie is pretty bad at times. Almost all the monsters are CGI, and at times it looks pretty bad. It isn't awful by any means, but by today's standards and for the budget that the movie has, I feel it could have done a better job at some points. Although I will say I love the fact that they made Slappy the Living Dummy an actual ventriloquist dummy. It's a physical dummy and a prop, so that's a good point on them. Another problem I had with the movie was it was a little vague on exactly what Goosebumps stories were used. You see, throughout the film, it is constantly said all of R.L. Stine's stories have monsters trapped in them. But what exactly does it mean when it says all of his stories? Is it only the original 62 stories published from 1992 to 1997? Or does it include the Goosebumps 2000 series that ran from 1998 to 2000? Which were meant to be a scarier take on the classic stories. How about the 2008 Horrorland series, where all the Goosebumps stories take place in the infamous Horrorland, from the original Goosebumps story, One Day at Horrorland? I'm pretty sure from what I saw, the movie only uses the original 62 stories, but if that's the case, what about the other stories? Where do they exist in the movie? Do they exist at all? Did Stine just not write them? For a lot of Goosebumps fans, this vague phrase of all of Stine's stories can be bothersome when it really isn't all of his stories. It's his original stories. And I feel they could have used that. They could have said, my original works. But regardless, it's just a small detail which may or may not bother some people. Finally, I'd like to talk about a noticeable plot hole I found. Okay, it honestly isn't even a plot hole. It's more of an inconsistency. And even at that point, it can be brushed off as simply, I'm overthinking this. Because you know me, I overthink things. Also, don't worry, there aren't any spoilers in here. Everything I talked about was either seen in a trailer or already prior knowledge. You don't have to see the movie to understand what I'm talking about. Basically, the problem I have is with Slappy the Dummy. See, in the Goosebumps books and the television series, Slappy was a regular ventriloquist dummy until someone read the incantation, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Karu Mari Odana Loma Malu Karano, which translates to, you and I are now one. However, in the movie, when he is freed from the manuscript, he's already alive. There's no need for the incantation. And there are several characters who could have read the incantation, and there's several reasons why they would read it. I can think of maybe 4 different situations where someone reads it using the scenario in the movie, seeing as how I've seen it. I don't get why they didn't include the incantation. For a film that does a near perfect job with the lore and background, it seems like a major oversight. Furthermore, Slappy is freed from the manuscript for the Goosebumps book Night of the Living Dummy. However, Slappy wasn't the antagonist for Night of the Living Dummy. His brother Mr. Wood was. It wasn't until Mr. Wood was destroyed at the end of Night of the Living Dummy that Slappy became evil. And we don't see him do anything evil until the sequel, Night of the Living Dummy 2. So why is he freed from the manuscript for the first one when he's not in the first one? I also feel Slappy was out of character in this movie. In any of the stories that Slappy's been, he's always been characterized as nothing more than a cruel prankster. All he really does is cause mischief, and that the owner is eventually blamed for. He never actually tries to hurt anyone. However, in the Goosebumps movie, Slappy seems to want to kill R.L. Stine. That's something that's just so out of character for him. He's a prankster. He wants to make people's lives miserable, but the movie doesn't get that aspect of him. He also hates being called a dummy in the movie, something that was never in any of the Night of the Living Dummy stories. It came out of nowhere. The film does a good job with all the other monsters, most of which only appear for a few minutes and don't have any lines, but it really seemed to mess up Slappy. I guess since Slappy is supposed to be the main antagonist, they had to change some details so he could be a better antagonist. But I would have preferred it if he was closer to how he was in the actual books, since the other monsters are very well represented from who they were in the stories. Either way, even ignoring this little oversight with Slappy, this is still a good movie. Older people will enjoy it because they most likely grew up with Goosebumps, or it was a part of their youth, or maybe they just heard about it and want to see what it's about. Younger people will enjoy it because it's simply a funny movie, and it's set up as though it were a horror film, so they might think it's interesting. Overall, I have to say that the Goosebumps film is just an average play. Definitely go see it if you're a Goosebumps fan, since they did a really good job getting all the details and representing the stories you grew up with and know and love. Sure, they have a few problems every here and there, but every film has its flaws. If you're not a Goosebumps fan, I'd say still go watch it. You probably won't enjoy it as much, because you won't get all the references, but you'll still enjoy it nonetheless, I think. So, there you all have it. If you've seen the Goosebumps movie, let me know what you thought of it. If you read Goosebumps or watched the TV show growing up, let me know what your favorite story was. Me, personally, my favorite story would have to be The Haunted Mask, just because of how well the TV show did that story. And also, if you preferred Are You Afraid of the Dark over Goosebumps growing up, tell me why, because I honestly don't remember Are You Afraid of the Dark at all, and a lot of people tell me it was better than Goosebumps. Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.